All right. Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Katie and I again for our next Blunt and Biased episode. Are you excited, Dr. Katie?
Yes. I love to talk about all things health related, but also like fad diets and when they're like true and false things,
No doubt, right? Because at fad diets, I feel like all of them have true and false things.
Yeah.
So before we kick off, in case we have some new viewers, who are you and what do you do?
Yes, please. Oh, me. I thought you meant for them. I was like, I don't see anyone. Dr. Katie Schneller. I'm a naturopathic physician. I have moved my practice to Tempe, Arizona. And I don't think I really have talked about it before, but I focus a lot in chronic illness, specifically autoimmune and also digestive health a lot. It's kind of what I love doing. And then I also have a little side thing where I love IV therapy. Anyway, just a little thing about me. How about you, Teresa?
So I am a certified health coach and behavioral change specialist and weight management specialist. And I work a lot with people that struggle with obesity as a result of a disordered relationship with food, people that struggle with emotional eating, binge eating, and have a love relationship with food because they love it, but really every time they eat it, they either feel guilty or they're struggling to lose weight. And so I work with the mind, belief systems, as well as the nutrition to help people create their ideal body so they can live their ideal life.
Yay. Love
it. Yay. So Dr. Kate and I are going to talk about intermittent fasting today because last episode, we were talking about, was it diet versus exercise? Was that our
Yes. Yeah, which is the most important thing for weight loss?
Yeah. So as we were talking about that, we're talking about all the various fad diets that are out there, and thought it would be a good topic for our viewers to really dive into each one of them. And I don't know if we'll do this back to back to back. That may get boring, but at least this week, we're going to dive into intermittent fasting and our thoughts on that. And with Dr. Katie, obviously being a naturopathic doctor, lots of background on nutrition. And so I'm super excited personally to hear what she knows about intermittent fasting and her thoughts on it. So I'm going to kick it off to you.
Okay, cool. So very generally, intermittent fasting is when you have a restricted window for consuming food or anything with calories. So that's a simple thing to start off with too. If you are someone who's practicing intermittent fasting or wants to get into it, what that means is you can have water, you can have black coffee, or you could have tea, and that's it, so long as it has 0 caloric intake. And from my understanding, the whole point of intermittent fasting is to get your body to utilize its fat stores for energy instead of the immediate calorie or glucose that's usually available that our body's running off of. So very typically, some people will do between 8 to 12 hours of eating. The tighter the window, the better, by all accounts. And when I was preparing for this talk, I was doing a little bit more research too. And there's a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins. She's a female, Dr. Williams, and she does a ton of research on intermittent fasting. And so I actually have I screenshot a few really interesting things about the most up-to-date research on it. And so I thought it might be kind of fun to play a little game.
I love games.
Okay. So, intermittent fasting has there are 5 new things that they've kind of updated information on. So the first one is about something relating to the brain. So I don't know, I'm kind of bad at creating questions, but let me try. Okay, let's do true or false first. True or false? Intermittent fasting boosts working memory in animals and verbal memory in adult humans.
I'd say true.
Yeah, true. So just to break that down a little bit. So working memory is conversion of short-term to long-term memory. And then verbal memory is what you're able to remember, of course, from words and how you repeat it back. So they use verbal memory and working memory tests when you're testing for Alzheimer's and things like that. So intermittent fasting, as of late, helps boost thinking and memory, which is really cool.
That's cool.
Okay, next. Does intermittent fasting increase blood pressure or decrease blood pressure and resting heart rate?
All right. So before I answer, we've got 2 viewers. Do you guys want to chime in and see if you know the answer to this?
Yeah. So I'll repeat the question. Does intermittent fasting increase or decrease blood pressure and resting heart rate?
Do 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 do. Are they? Did he? Is Alex Trebek still alive?
Anyone? No, I think he passed.
Did he pass? Dang.
Yeah.
All
Decrease.
right. Hi, Tanya.
Correct. You win.
Woohoo! We need
Yes,
like prizes if we're gonna do
decreases.
stuff like this.
I know, we should.
Good job, Tanya.
Okay, let's do the next one. So let's have a guess for this one. So like we'll put increase. Hi. Okay, so under physical performance category, young men who fasted for what amount of time showed fat loss while maintaining muscle mass? So how many hours do young men have to fast in order to show fat loss while maintaining muscle mass?
Ooh. All right, Tanya. Are you giving a guess on this one?
I know, right? She's
know.
our one contestant.
Our one contestant. I'll be number 2. I'm trying to think. Oh, what do we got?
48 hours.
There.
Yes.
I'm going to show. Look at that.
Oh,
Tanya.
cool.
Right?
That's awesome.
Things we could do. I think for me, so fasting, since it's intermittent fasting, I'm going to go with 14 hours.
It's 16 hours. So really close. Yeah. So only 16 hours.
Because I've heard 12 to 16 is the ideal intermittent fasting range of fasting, with 14 being that sweet spot because it's in the middle. Right. But yeah, I did hear 16.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's do another true or false. Okay. In human and animal studies, did intermittent fasting prevent obesity? True or false? Or I guess I should say that as like a statement instead of a question. Intermittent fasting prevents obesity in humans and animals. True or false?
I'll let Tanya go first. Oh, we have 2, Tanya and whomever.
Ooh, yay. Second.
Chime in. True or false? Does intermittent fasting help stop obesity? So Tanya says true.
True.
What about our second guest? Are they going to be brave and hop on and chat?
No.
Oh, we lost him. And I agree with Tanya. I also think it's true.
Yes. Yeah, true. So interestingly, they did add a specificity in the statement, which was that in 6 various studies, obese adult humans lost weight through intermittent fasting. So because they're talking about diabetes and obesity, I wonder if just every person in the study had to be obese anyway, and maybe that's why they added the descriptor there. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the answer is true. And then the final question is something that I didn't really realize, but makes a lot of sense. And again, forming the questions is hard. We can just do another true or false. True or false, intermittent fasting reduces tissue damage after surgery and improves your healing results?
I almost put up the last answer.
Yeah.
I think. Tanya, you ready? This is fun. And she's such a good participant. Tanya, you rock.
Yes, so it's true. And that's kind of all like the fun that I have. Did you want to add anything that you know of, both pro or con? Because that was kind of like positively focused for intermittent fasting, and it's not for everybody. And I do want to get to, of course, the part where we talk about who it's not indicated for. But what's your experience with it, or what else could you add?
I found this fascinating. So just in my background in the various seminars that I attend, there's Dr. Pamela Peake, who talks a lot about intermittent fasting, and what she had explained. And I thought this was neat because I wasn't really sure I understood why intermittent fasting worked. Mm-hmm. But how she described it was, it's the nucleus of the cell, the mitochondria of the cell, that does all of the fat burning. And so when it has a chance to cleanse itself, which it can only do when it's not busy digesting food and burning fat, when it has the ability to fully empty and cleanse, it becomes much more efficient at the fat burning process. And so that's the benefit of the fast, giving the body time to digest all the food, do all of its digestion and absorption. So that way it has a moment to do nothing but just heal itself and focus on its own health. And at
Yeah.
that point, it can work at maximum.
Yeah.
And so
And
I thought that was a really good description. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, sorry to interrupt you. But yeah, and just so people know, like mitochondria, that's the energy portion of the cell. And so mitochondrial damage causes all sorts of chronic illnesses, and all sorts of like the symptoms that we see that we don't really know about. And so there's kind of a lot of buzz around mitochondria recently.
Yeah. So this is what Tanya says. It's been helpful for long haulers. So I'm not familiar with long haulers. Dr. Katie, are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah, like the COVID. So like people that acquire COVID-19 and then they are ill and feel bad for a long time.
Gotcha.
Really recovering and have like long-term effects, specifically like I was reading something the other day, and it was talking about how the lung health of certain survivors of COVID are effectively the same to those that have had COPD or emphysema.
I have read that. I read that a while ago too.
Mm-hmm.
That's always just so scary.
Yeah. Long haulers. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good to know as well. If it does help, because that is just a very relevant topic right now with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is helpful, and Tanya, is it helpful from an energetic standpoint or a recovery standpoint? What have you either read or experienced yourself on that? I think that'd be great to share.
Yeah.
And while I wait for her to type, so I find it very interesting. A lot of people will do a diet type, but not really understand the science behind it or why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I really liked about Dr. Pamela Peeke, it was very scientifically based on why, right? The cleansing of the cell in order for it to be more effective and efficient. And what I don't know, and I don't know if you know, Dr. Katie, is how much more efficient is that cell? Is this a fad? I mean, with all the things you were just pointing out, there's a lot of positives, so it can't just be that fad. But you know how like there'll be one scientific study that says, oh my God, you'll burn so much more fat, and it's really like 0.05% more than just doing whatever. Yeah. Any idea on like how much more efficient a cell is when it has that ability to cleanse and start from scratch?
I don't have an exact percentage. I would just be guessing. And everything is so person dependent anyway. Even if you have like up to 45% more effective, and that doesn't mean that that's the effect that you're going to get. Yeah. I'm not sure.
So I think what is interesting, right? So through the studies, and most of my studies have come through Dr. Pamela Peeke. Otherwise, it's just reading things that you just hope are based on fact. But so 12 to 16 being the ideal span of fasting hours, and then in what your recent study had shown is that 16-hour time frame being a great time frame to be able to continue to build muscle and also burn fat.
Right.
Have you heard a lot of signs? Ooh, hold on. Let's see. This is from Tanya. Here we go.
This is almost 12 hours and utilizing. Yeah. So, the same sort of thing, right? Like post-surgical, it's the same, just improves the healing process.
Yeah, it doesn't distract the body, right? Because digestion and absorption is a lot of work for the body. And so when you take that distraction away, the body can really focus where it's needed.
Right.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thanks for sharing, Tanya.
Yeah.
So anyway, so have you, what I was asking is, I've heard of people where they just eat for 4 hours, right? Like there's a 20-hour fasting window, and people, from a scientific perspective on what's beneficial to the body. And we talked about fasting and we talked about cleanses and that kind of thing. So I feel like this kind of goes hand in hand in that. Tell me a little bit about what you understand regarding how long people, like what's beneficial? What is fad? What is beneficial?
From what I know and remember from school, and then from like recent, brushing myself up on like most recent research on intermittent fasting, there are basically 2 types, which we didn't really get into. So this is how at least most people behave, is they eat during an 8-hour window, 7 days out of the week, and that's it. Or they eat an 8-hour window or even sometimes normal window, but on 2 days days out of the week, they're only eating one meal that's approximately 500 to 600 calories during that meal. It can't be junk though. And that's something else that I think, we definitely want to like at least touch on, is that what you eat does still matter. It's not just that because you're not eating the whole day except for one or two meals or this short window of time, you don't want to be eating crap or stuff that's let's just say like not rich in nutrients.
And I'm going to jump in real quick, right? And I tell my clients
Yeah.
this a lot. There's a big difference between health and weight loss. Can you
Mhm.
eat junk in that 5-hour, 8-hour window and lose weight because you're fasting the rest of it? The answer is yes. But this
Yeah.
is a health and wellness show. This is not just about weight loss. Weight loss isn't necessarily healthy. So
Right.
from Dr. Katie and my standpoint is, yeah, you want to be eating nutritionally dense foods and still eating what's good for you from a health aspect of it. Because if you lose weight and you have, pardon my French, feel like shit, or you're not doing
Mhm.
good things for your health, then why even bother just for an aesthetic? So I
Right.
just wanted to throw that
Yeah.
out there.
No, yeah, no, that's really helpful and important to distinguish because, and especially I imagine with a lot of your clients, you want to verify that. Like, I understand you want to lose weight, but do you also want to be healthy?
Yeah.
It's a good distinction. Just to get back to the question. So there are those two types. And that's still like healthy and considered beneficial. But once you get past 72 hours of fasting, that's when your body starts to enter into the starvation mode where it actually holds on to its fat stores. This more applies for like literal food fasting. People sometimes do water fasting, sometimes juice fasting, and you're getting some calories in there, but you're not getting any fiber. And that's one of the important parts of weight loss, is not just the nutrients from the fruits and veggies that you're juicing, also the fiber part that helps to gather the junk out of your intestines to expel. So anyway, I think that's the answer for that. Is like anything past 72 hours of fasting, then your body starts to hold on to what it has. And you won't lose weight and it enters into starvation mode.
So with that being said, I want to just throw something out there, and we've talked about this a few times, but whoever's listening, you do need to be your own expert. There
Mhm.
is no one answer at all. So 72 hours of which your body starts to store fat. Um, Super true. But I can tell you that I've also had clients where if they aren't eating on a regular basis, their body begins to store fat. You
Mhm.
have to really pay attention to your own body and be your own expert. Everything we share is going to be a generality of
Right.
what we've studied and what we know, what we've experienced, but that doesn't mean it's correct for you. You take it and you apply what works and doesn't, and it gives you information to use to experiment. And then once you start experimenting, understanding your experience with that experiment is your truth, and
Right.
you have to be your own expert. So I do want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah.
So Dr. Katie, from a detriment standpoint, like who shouldn't be using intermittent fasting and why?
Yep. Yeah, really good. So some people try to use it, of course, for weight management. Sometimes other people try to help, try to use it to heal chronic conditions like irritable bowel disease, or IBS, which is different from IBD, by the way. IBD is Crohn's and celiac disease. IBS is basically just a name for a symptom. Right. So here are some people that should not do it or who need to check with your primary care first. Kids, of course. Anybody under 18 is really what that means. Women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, always, if you're pregnant, if you're trying to become pregnant, if you're recently pregnant, like you do not add new stuff into your regimen, especially if you haven't talked to a healthcare provider, because even things like herbs are toxic. Certain things can, of course, pass through to the kid through breastfeeding or through the umbilical cord if you're still pregnant. People with diabetes or blood sugar problems. This includes type 1 and type 2. So we don't mess with blood sugar with you guys. If your type 2 diabetes is in remission, if your hemoglobin A1C or your HbA1c is beneath that threshold of the pre-diabetic range of under 5.7, then you can kind of consider with the supervision by your doctor to do something like intermittent fasting to help. But if you're, in the middle of type 2 diabetes and you're working on diet and exercise, it's awesome. But intermittent fasting is not indicated for you. And especially if you're type 1 diabetic. And of course, diabetes, just in general, careful with blood sugar and diet changes. And then the final one is, a touchy subject and maybe a good segue into something you can talk about, but anyone with a history of eating disorders. If you're somebody who's had a really unhealthy or bad relationship with food, then this probably isn't for you, because any type of restriction is not good for your mental health, right? So, and your body's safety. I imagine you deal with that sort of thing a lot since you deal with people's relationships with food, right, Teresa?
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about when we talked in our cleansing episode is, right, when you look at food as good and bad and you feel guilt when you eat, intermittent fasting is a great excuse to then stop eating, and you
Mhm.
feel validated that you can stop eating because the scientists and the doctors have said this is healthy. And there are benefits, as Dr. Katie and I have pointed out, to intermittent fasting from a physical standpoint, but we're human beings and the mental side is infinitely stronger than the physical side. And
Mhm.
so if intermittent fasting is used as a weapon, as any tool can be, then it's
Mhm.
really not a tool anymore, and it really needs to be avoided. And so, really thinking through, if you experience guilt through eating, if you do look at food as good and bad and struggle um, to eat without a strong emotion, then intermittent fasting isn't good for you from a mental space.
Mhm.
Food should bring you should be able to enjoy food and still maintain your ideal body weight. And so if you struggle to do that, then intermittent fasting is not real good for you.
Mhm.
Um, and on a different note, though, Dr. Katie, from my own experience and adrenal fatigue, which isn't necessarily identified on the Western side of medicine, but adrenal fatigue is also not for those that's what I've heard from those that struggle with a high stress either personality or just a true high stress life. Intermittent fasting may not be the best way to go because it fatigues the adrenals and they're already fatigued by the high stress that you
Right.
deal with. So I don't know if you want to talk to
Yeah,
that.
that's good. I would say it wouldn't necessarily be like a medical contraindication, but certainly a lifestyle contraindication possibly, because what you're doing then by restricting your window to the 8 to 12 hours, which is what's recommended. And again, in case for those late joiners, 8 hours is like the most ideal for intermittent fasting if that's been approved by your healthcare provider. Um, you're relying on your body's stores of energy, but you're also asking your adrenal glands to output cortisol to keep you awake, and to keep you doing the tasks throughout your day. So, there are a few ways, by the way, to test for adrenal fatigue in the Western world. One easy way, but not 100% definitive, is to get a blood draw at 8 in the morning. It's called an AM cortisol or morning cortisol level. It does need to be right around 8 a.m. And that's a good indicator of whether you have any cortisol in the morning or whether you have the right amount. Then there's also something called a cortisol times 4, or an ASI times 4. That's an adrenal stress index. And basically, they'll take at least your value of cortisol, if not some other hormones, 4 times throughout the day. You do swabs and you can identify your cortisol curve. It should be higher in the morning and then taper off as the day progresses, which makes sense, right? We want more cortisol. We want to be more awake in the morning, and then we want to be able to fall asleep at night. And so, if you're somebody who feels like you're just no energy throughout the day, that's called a flattened curve for cortisol. And so that's a marker for, or a good indicator that you have adrenal fatigue. And then you could also have a reverse rhythm, which is where your cortisol is bottomed out in the morning, but then higher at night. And that's for the people that feel like they're really productive in the evening, especially past like 6 to 8 p.m. That's another indicator that you might have adrenal fatigue. So just to wrap that all up, intermittent fasting might not be for you.
Yeah, because I know I had been in stage 3 adrenal fatigue, and um, the amount of stress already on the body, not eating creates just that additional stress
Right.
that your body's, to Tanya's point from earlier, right? Yes, the digestion and absorption can be a distractor from healing the body, but then also eating and for different reasons, the not eating could create stress on the body that it
Right.
just doesn't need at the time.
It
So,
is,
um,
not eating when you're hungry is a stress, period. Plain simple. No
yeah.
matter who you are, no matter what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to point out is Dr. Katie mentioned just a few minutes ago, the 8 hours being the ideal for intermittent fasting. If you really think through what that means, if you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and you wake up and you eat breakfast at 8 in the morning, you're intermittent fasting. So most of us are doing a version of intermittent fasting. Well, all of us doing a version of intermittent fasting. When we're asleep, we're not
Sorry,
eating.
8 hours for the time that you're eating. So
Oh,
like
8 hours
you're
if
only
you're eating.
eating,
Okay.
yes, yeah, you're only eating 8 hours. So like
I was just saying, I was
that
like,
would
8 hours
be
seems a little short.
8 hours is only, yeah, like your ability
Your
to eat
eating time
window.
frame.
Yes,
I
yes.
got you. Okay. Because I was just saying, either way, we all do a version of intermittent fasting in the fact that we sleep and we don't eat. It's a
Right,
matter of how long after, in that, how long we make that window, right? Like
right.
that's the deal. And so I think where the fad comes in is when the window becomes extremely elongated, where you're not eating.
Mhm.
And, you know, if people are just, you have a 4 hour window on a everyday basis because that's like the most current thing you've read,
Right,
that's not actually scientifically proven to be really good for you.
right. Unless
Um,
it's 2 days a week, like I mentioned. If it's
right.
2 days a week, there's science behind that for some reason, but not if that's your only window. The window there is the 8 hours of eating.
Yeah. So I think something that's super important to understand, and Dr. Katie was doing a little bit more research, and she was looking at John Hopkins University, Harvard University, looking at different medically sound websites or publications are going to be a good place to find your information. But just
Mhm.
grabbing information willy-nilly off of Google, just because it ranks number one on your first page of a Google search, doesn't mean that it is a valid resource.
Yes.
And that's why we felt this was a good topic for us to cover, because whether it's keto, intermittent fasting, or anything else that right now is super popular, it has scientific background, but it's not necessarily the scientific background that's being shared with you on page one of Google.
Right. Please do not use Wikipedia or WebMD. Like if you looked up naturopathic medicine on Wikipedia, you would never come see a naturopathic doctor. You would have no understanding of how much education we have. And it's a joke amongst the field at this point that we're unable for some reason to get anyone to change the Wikipedia article. And now I'm giving it more traffic. The point is to shouldn't have even mentioned it. But the point is that the places you want to go, like one solid website is Mayo Clinic. That's a pretty safe. It's a pretty safe site. Like there's good information on there, unbiased.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
it. Really looking for those that have medical clout and are coming at this from a true scientific background without sensationalism. Because you can see a publication where there was one study done with 20 people that's now meant to represent the entire world, and it's being spouted as fact. And one study with 20 people is not indeed fact. It is one study with 20 people. So
Mhm.
um, that's really the purpose of today. We're sharing what we've read from reliable sources, from our own training, from our own background, with the understanding you take it and use it and learn on your own what works best for you, understanding that nothing that's being said, studied, shared is religion. It's not fact. It is the science of the moment, and you've really got to take it, experiment, and understand what works best for you.
Right. Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Dr. Katie?
I don't think so. Just always ask your doctor, right? I mean, that's the point. But yeah, I think
And then I am going to give a caveat to that.
yeah.
If you have a naturopathic doctor, definitely ask your naturopathic doctor. If you have a Western medicine doctor and they do give you an answer, ask for the science behind it. Right now, from what I've heard, a lot of the Western medical doctors are immediately just going to keto. Um, and their background in nutrition very frequently is not extensive. So understanding where that recommendation is coming from would be I think very smart. Be your best advocate. I would still ask the why question to your naturopathic doctor.
Right.
Get an understanding of where your advice is coming from. Because once again, you are your best advocate and expert. Take the advice you're given, try it, and pay attention to your own body.
Right. Yeah. And trust your gut if you feel like the person doesn't know what they're talking about. Like if they kind of don't give you a lot of information, a lot of Western doctors also will tell specifically my patients, but also like, patients that are seen by naturopaths all over the place, to stop taking certain supplements. And that's just because they don't know anything about them. So you do have to you just keep in mind, education wise, your Western medicine doctor at this point gets about 8 weeks of nutrition, and naturopathic physicians get 2 years, just for an example. So there's a big difference in education there. And if somebody tells you not to do something, just figure out what their education is on the matter, right? Because everyone's got opinions.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of Western medicine doctors do a much more extensive research after the fact, just like we do, and are very educated on it. So I'm not saying not to trust your doctor. I am saying just to question, make sure you're getting a fully educated response, and you're making the best decision for yourself. Because once again, you are your greatest advocate. No one's going to protect you as well as you. And so learn yourself, experiment based on research, understanding that your body may respond differently, and you need to be open to that and just listen to it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yay.
Buddy.
All right, guys. Well, this is fun. Tanya, I know you're not watching anymore, but I really appreciate all of your interaction.
Yes.
That was super fun. Thanks for the quiz and the fun game, Dr.
Yay.
Yay. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. We are being blunt and biased as always. I don't know what our topic is for in 2 weeks, but just keep updated on our Facebook pages. Love Yourself Lean for my side, and Inclusive Natural Medicine on Dr. Katie's side. And we will put out the invite for the next event with what we will be discussing.
Yay.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your week, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. Ciao.